This is Product by Design, a podcast by Prodigy, where we explore technology, artificial intelligence, user experience, product management, and the philosophy of building products and companies. All right, welcome back to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle, and this week we have another awesome guest with us, Suman Kanuganti. Suman, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be here, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Let me introduce you very, very briefly, and then love for you to tell us more about yourself. But Suman is the co-founder and CEO of Personal.ai, which we're going to talk a lot more about, I believe. But Suman, why don't you tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, by background, I'm an engineer. I have a robotics background as well, and fortunate enough to get another degree in MBA too. But I'm most passionate about creating brands and creating experiences that are trustworthy to humans. That's kind of how I would say. My philosophy always has been you don't solve the humans, you solve the problems. So I always try to leverage the technology to kind of augment individual people's experiences. In my previous company, Aira, which is AIRA, it was about using AI plus AR with human in the loop for people who are blind and low vision for everyday activities that otherwise they would be having challenges with, and experiences that otherwise they would not have. So fast forward if you, I'm sure everybody been to Starbucks, everybody has Disney, everybody has Amazon. Right now, pretty much all those companies kind of adapt to Aira as a accommodation for people who are blind and low vision. And Personal AI is sort of similar in terms of philosophy, in terms of vision. But our goal is to, essentially extend an individual person's mind with their own personal AI model that belongs to them. So it's always about augmenting and extending individual people capabilities and that are close to consumer experiences. That's what I'm passionate about. And but otherwise I'm a technical person, but have some business background as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to touch on a couple of things that you talked about just now, Aira and your work there, and then what you're doing with Personal AI, which from what you just said sounds very science fiction, but also very, this is what's coming. But before we do that, why don't you tell us about anything that you like to do outside of work and outside of the office?
Outside of work, I have a 5-year-old daughter. So most of my time outside the work, I spend with her, and of course with my family, wife. And we make up a lot of different stories, and we, kind of interestingly enough, she's very much into, creating and doing different sorts of experiments. So I go with the flow and, kind of leave her world. So I do enjoy it. I do enjoy that time with the family. But in terms of what I would do, even beyond that, I'm a big volleyball player. By the way, I do run. I do half marathons. This year, my goal was 12, but I don't know if I can meet that. I'm currently around 5 or 6. So those are some of the things that I do beyond work.
That is great. I love volleyball too. It's such a great sport.
Yeah. You don't often see people who love volleyball. It's all about basketball and football.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's totally true. Well, I'm interested in, stepping back a little and learning more about your journey. You mentioned, you being a very technical person and then, founding these two companies that we're going to talk more about, Aira and Personal AI. But tell us more about your journey. What led you to where you are now?
Oh dear. I always think about it as, whatever I'm doing right now and what I will do next is built on the experiences that I've built in the past, right? In other words, I grew up in India. I was moderate family, pretty much I had to struggle to get good education as well. And I'm fortunate enough to have parents who struggled hard for us, put us in good schools and worked our way through, getting good education. And then I got an opportunity to kind of come to United States to do my master's in robotics back in Midwest. Actually, I went to University of Missouri, Columbia. That's where I got exposed to robotics and advanced engineering systems. So generally, I think it's always a composition of, okay, you learned XYZ, or you gained so much of different experiences, and then what builds on top of that experience. So I think my life is probably like a step function almost in the entirety of my life, and I think it's continuing to happen even like right now. Then I, went to working at like big tech corporations. Being a robotics person, I was actually programming robots at Caterpillar in Mossville, Peoria. That was so much fun. Oh my god, I miss it in a way. And slowly moved on to engineering systems, more about software as well. And I went to Qualcomm. I went to Intuit. Intuit was a pivotal moment for me because I think by that time it was at a point where I grounded myself, like, different, I guess, technologies, if you will, all the way from like hardware to the software. And, if you are a network person, like all the way from layer 1 to layer 7, if you will. And then I picked up this like core desire or passion. When you create something and people touch it, there is something about it. It gives you energy. And that's what happened to me at Intuit because, quote unquote, I was the person, in a TurboTax team, right? Now, accounting, quote unquote, considered like boring, but still, so many millions of people, used TurboTax and had, pleasant experience with actually fulfilling the taxes. So I think that's kind of where my desire to building products and like solving problems and like touching people kind of came about. And I went to got my MBA from Radio School of Management and immediately started building companies.
Awesome. And one of those companies was Aira, which was the previous company that you founded. And I'm fascinated by this. And you mentioned it was for and is for blind or low vision individuals. So maybe tell us a little bit about what prompted that, creating this company and what exactly is it?
So it's a combination of a dearest and closest friend of mine. His name is Matt Brock. But also being a technologist, I was pretty much trying every new technology that comes out. And also being a hardware person, I was, much into any new hardware that hits the market. So this was back in the times when Google Glass came out. So I was close to the problem. And then I saw a solution, which is, oh, geez, there is camera that is located right in front of, a wearable device where this could be more useful. And hang on, like, rather than thinking about, giving it for people who can see, it can actually serve the purpose of, the accessing the visual information for a blind person. It's because I was close to the problem. So I think it was a natural kind of, progression for me. It's like, hey, let's try this thing out. And then, yeah, man, I mean, this is back in like 2014, 2015. And Google Glasses, like there are all this like, press and issues and camera and everything else. But then, I'm just going from one blind person to the other blind person, putting the glasses on. We connected to like, human agents behind the scenes who basically sit in front of the computer. And we created this dashboard. It's kind of fascinating. It's almost like mixed reality. So it's almost like they teleport into your world, right? Mm-hmm. And they're seeing for you. And the dashboard is just not the camera, but it also has the kind of environments and the surroundings and everything else. So you get the feel of like, looking left, looking right, straight ahead, and the maps and all the information that is coming to you as like a remote person. And of course, there is a little bit of like AI involved in terms of, fast processing the information that is coming at you. So yeah, I mean, that literally was, it changed like how, like, people conceptualize this idea of like this visual information. Like, what does it mean to, reading book for a 6-year-old daughter that you cannot see for the first time, right? What about like going to the Disneyland and kind of experiencing, what does it mean like beyond the audio descriptions? So yeah, we had like fascinating stories, and I fell in love with the problem, and I made a lot of friends in the blind community. Yeah, and today it's like even every airport has Aira for people who are blind. So it's pretty widespread adopted by major, not just government, but also big tech and retails as well, including banks.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. And, being close to somebody as well who has lost their sight is, to take the problems and then, apply the technology and all of the different things that we can in order to, help in what tends to be a very visual based world, offer the same type of information and experience to somebody who may not be able to necessarily navigate in some places. And that can be a really, really challenging thing, like in airports or in other environments that are very, there are a lot of people, there's a lot of things happening, and being able to help navigate those types of things. I think that's just, it's a fascinating problem, and something that I think most of us don't think about most of the time until you're potentially with somebody who is trying to navigate some of these things that aren't the familiar. They're very new and very difficult to go through.
Totally.
So I'm interested then, because you founded and you built Aira, and then moved to your next company, which is Personal.ai. So tell us, what made you move from what you were doing into Personal.ai, and what exactly is Personal.ai?
What made me move? So the genesis story for Personal.ai kind of ties back to Aira as well, because at the core, the inspiration for Personal.ai is my desire to have a conversation both emotionally and intellectually with a last co-founder as well as investor of mine. His name is Larry Bock, of my previous company, Aira. And he created around 27 different companies. And, we as human beings, we generally tend to learn from different places. Internet obviously is one of those places, but we also learn a lot from our, professors and the people around us as well. The interesting thing about learning from individual like humans is this element of trust, is element of connection that you carry that you probably sometimes do not get, even though you're taking long periods of time to do the research that is available on the internet. How do you negotiate? How do you, think about strategies? How do you think about experiments? He taught me a lot. So then the question becomes, oh geez, he passed away and I cannot remotely remember everything that he told me, or I still want to have a brainstorming session with him. I wish I had Larry's AI, during my times building Aira, because he passed away within 18 months of building it together. So it was in the back of the mind for a long period of time until, the board and, myself, we kind of came together and decided to bring in a new CEO to grow the company, Aira. That gave me a good opportunity to kind of step into my next passion that's been building for almost 2 years, right? And the technology was also right about in the beginning stages in terms of AI. And luckily, given Aira is also technologically pretty, heavy, that includes wearables, hardware, human in the loop, AI techniques. I carried pretty much all the things that I learned, putting together the business and putting together the team for Personal.ai. So what is Personal.ai? As I was mentioning, it's as simple as thinking about an extension of an individual that you can have a conversation with, right? It's an extension of somebody else's mind. In general, the most common modality of people learning from each other is, of course, the computers, and the other is human beings. But when it comes down to humans, it's about communication. It's about talking to each other. So we wanted a system that is so grounded in an individual, that is grounded in their facts, that is grounded in their opinions, that is grounded in their ways of thinking. When I found Sharon Zhang, who is my current CTO, she basically said, hey, we cannot use large language models. This is back in 2020, right? So even then, it was cutting edge research. We cannot use that for so and so reasons, which is, hallucinations and, fast forward the problems we know right now. And she said we had to take an alternate approach, which is building small models. So we took a contrary approach to the large language models. We actually started building small language models that is grounded in one person's memory. So what is Personal.ai? Personal.ai is a model that basically mimics an individual person, that is grounded in their facts and opinions, in their own voice, that is backed by the memory that belongs to them.
That's super fascinating. And I'm interested in how it works, because you describe personal AI as an extension of yourself that can interact with anyone in your own voice and your own style, with kind of like you're saying, trained to an individual, which again, if we think almost science fiction, this feels like the progress towards, what we would have considered to be an absolutely crazy idea, a decade ago or even a few years ago. But this idea that you can extend yourself.
Like even 2 years ago, I had hard time like convincing, even technical people and investors, like this is going to be happening. Well, here we are. AI is everywhere right now.
It is. And so tell us more about, how does that work? How would I extend myself with a personal AI? So not necessarily, a large language model or something trained in just general knowledge, but something that is very specific to me.
Yeah. So I would describe the components, and then I will describe the application that you would use to get there. So at the simplest level, right, you should be thinking about personal AI as, if you have experienced Alexa, right? I'm sure most of the people are, or even some form of smart speakers. We say, hey, Alexa, and ask a question. And basically it's a query to the internet, and sometimes backed by large language models as well. Think about this one as Kyle AI, like, hey, Kyle, right? And then I'm talking to you, right? So the experience is pretty much that form of conversation, that form of communication, except that it's not a general, intelligence as much as it is an individual personal intelligence, right? So that's the basics. How it works from a technological perspective is that every person has a memory. What does a memory mean? Think about every minute, if you would wish, capturing a piece of information that you have said, that you have captured, right? And it's time bound. And over a period of time, as you learn as a student, as you grow as in your career, as you become, trailblazer, like in the future, like, influencing other people, you have all these like memories that are formed. So that is essentially the data that basically is then used to train your unique AI language model that anybody can have a conversation with. So how can anybody use it today? There is a mobile application as well as there is a desktop application, and people can download and they can choose to add any of the historical memories that they would want. And they could also choose to add memories on an ongoing basis. So that will continuously improve or increase the quality of your model, as well as, the synthesis of your own mind. In terms of use, the application will also support being able to invite other people to chat with you with your AI in the loop. So imagine text messaging experiences or WhatsApp kind of an experiences, right? Where Suman sends a message to Kyle. Let's, Kyle, I'm coming down to Utah. What are some of the favorite places to eat? I'm with my wife and kids, so I need a family-friendly one. Well, I could go look up in the internet, or I could like simply text message you. And on your side, your AI, since it already knows you, if you have said that to somebody else before, or add it to your memory, it will automatically draft message for you, right? And that you can still choose to review. And yeah, that sounds, here is the place that I would go. And you would simply swipe right to send that message, right? So there is a applicability in terms of how simple it is to be able to train with this core mechanism of texting, which is the communication medium that we use almost everyday basis, integrated. And, as you communicate with more people, as you communicate with yourself more, the model just gets, more promising. And the use of your own model in multiple different places also gets more prominent.
That's super fascinating. And I'm interested, what is it, what are some of the training data that you use now? You mentioned,
Sure.
Some of the communications, and what do you potentially see that expanding to in the future? Because I can imagine, a scenario where if I'm training a personal AI, it has potential access to literally everything. And I assume that's not the case right now, but this idea of, if I want it to know me as well as possible and be able to reflect all of these things, to the broader the data set and the broader, whether it's
Sure.
just about anything,
Yep.
the more opportunity you have for that. So what
Yeah.
does that look like now, and what will that look like in the future?
Yeah, sure. So you can think about personal data to train your own model as pretty much anything that you have ever authored historically. So that could mean that there are autobiographies that you have written, the emails that you have sent, maybe the historical text messages that you have sent. Maybe there are documents in your Google Drive that you've written, maybe blogs that you have written, maybe podcasts that you have spoken, right? So it can pretty much be any authored content on your behalf if the purpose of your AI model is indeed to start kind of almost reflecting and replicating, your mind. Currently, the system does support, ingesting the data in the native format, which is, information directly fed into your model through the personal AI apps. You can also feed in the URLs. So let's say if there is a blog or if there's a YouTube video, you can push those in as well. You can integrate into your existing like Google Drive accounts. And if you have documents that are authored by you, you can use those as well. And over a period of time, we intend to add, even more easier mechanisms to, sync your historical communications. Now, the most interesting thing is, with personal AI, we give the ownership of the data to the people. We give the ownership of the model to them as well. What that means is the company will not or cannot use the data for ads business at all. Zero chances, because we remove ourselves out of the equation too. So from a data perspective, it's anything and everything, all the personal data that you would wish. And right now there are automated mechanisms and there are some manual mechanisms, and it will only get more and more easier over a period of time in the company progress.
That's really, really incredible. And I'm interested too in, what do you see as the applications of this? You mentioned, some of the texting and communication. What are people using this for now? And how do you see that expanding in the future?
Yeah. So that we think about like two modes, right? One, you can think about it as an alternative communication channel, right? Which is, if you care about privacy, if you care about every communication that you're having with other people to work in your favor, and have your AI kind of help you draft these messages automatically. You can essentially choose to think about personal AI as an alternate communication mechanism. Now, the most beautiful thing is it's not just a human to human communication. You can choose to go human to AI communication as well. Let's say I would, want to communicate with my coach, and she probably is not available, but I still want to have a conversation. While they are in airplane, they can set them, instead of airplane mode, autopilot mode, we call them. So I'm having a direct access to their mind, talking to their AI. Right. So that's like one way to think about, which is like an alternate communication medium than what you may be using at work or in personal life, such as WhatsApp or Telegram or Slack. The other form that we also see a lot of more use is coming in is more like omni communication media. In other words, if you indeed are in existing communications such as WhatsApp, such as text messages, such as websites or email, right? You can choose to have personal AI draft those messages for you in those platforms as well, where you still have the ability to kind of control and approve the AI messages, but at the same time, it kind of goes into multiple different channels, including social media. For example, for business people, they would want to have their AIs, automatically representing their brand in Facebook Messenger, right? But still the control is within that individual person.
It's interesting because, this is the kind of thing that my wife and I were just talking about recently was, hey, need to step away for a minute. She's like, why don't you just turn on an AI to respond to some of the messages while you step away from your desk for a minute. And I laughed and I was like, that's exactly what I need, is to be able to step away for a minute. And if anybody needs something, like, they're still able to get answers, but I don't have to constantly be, not that I am constantly monitoring it, but I don't have to be, which I think is a fascinating thing.
It's so good because right now I'm living in it. And I know my team is continuously like using my own AI that could, vary from like brainstorming with your AI, or like writing specific pieces of blogs, or maybe replying to somebody else in the email, or like writing a byline to a Wall Street Journal article as a response. So like, look, these people are asking about these interview questions on the ethics and privacy. How would I respond? Oh my God, it's just crazy how many things that happen in parallel. And believe it or not, once you are in the personal AI ecosystem, it's not about talking to the bots anymore. It's about still talking to people, but they are getting help a little bit more from their own AI, and there is that identity associated with it. It's not somebody else's chat bot, right? It's not somebody trained that you actually control the idea of this training. It's actually yours. It's representing you, right? And you know what data went in there, right? That's the level of control that you have with this model. And it's not dependent on the large language model. So your data is not going to any big tech as well. So, oh my God, I think it's just a matter of like people getting to really understand the depth associated with, what we built. And I think some of the existing community people, once they're in it, they love it. There's an emotional attachment because it's not a service, it's an asset. It's an asset that you build for your life, and there is no stopping to it, and it will live even when somebody leaves the world, right? Like, you can still have these conversations with them. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And I think that's another fascinating part, because you mentioned it earlier as part of the genesis of it. And I see more and more people, looking at that sort of thing, being able to not to have some that continued connection where it doesn't necessarily have to mean that somebody is gone if you're able to still have a, like you said, a brainstorming session or a conversation very similar to like what you would have. And to me, this is it's kind of a new area, but an absolutely fascinating one that I think we're starting to see more and more of. Have you seen that as part of building personal AI, and what has been some of the things that you've seen regarding that specifically?
Yeah, very good question. So the approach that we have taken is, given it is so broad, we let the market decide who are the ones who has appetite for this. So what we've done is, like late last year, before ChatGPT came about, we started like taking some beta applicants to kind of see what their motivations are, and build their models. And in the learning process, we built our applications and the products as well. Because first 2 years of the company, it was all about building the tech, right? Building the data models, and how do you scale the models, etc., etc. And since April, so April is when we went like GA. In other words, like anybody can come in and like train it and use it for themselves. And we saw all kinds of use cases. We definitely saw all kinds of use cases, and people's expectations are all over the board as well. In a way, it was intentional too, because we wanted to see what kinds of needs exist out there given this platform, and what will people do. And some people are like it's personal AI on steroids right now. Like, they basically, like 80% of the job is done by their personal AI in terms of communications, automations, drafting, and everything else. Some people probably never have invested enough time, to actually train the models. So we invested some easier mechanisms to make it more effective, even with like one or two memories. So long story short, we do see a lot of people building their legacy, with their AI, one of the original applications. So that is still happening. We are seeing a lot more appetite for small business owners specifically, who probably are dealing with multiple different clients or communities or customers and people around them, has a lot more need, if you will, for automating some of their like daily communication needs. Either it be writing email, writing tweets, generating blogs, text messages, responding to clients, all those things. And you have a mechanism to attach a AI phone number to your AI too. So it's almost like, hey Kyle, you have a phone number, your Kyle AI has a phone number too. So you can technically think about like, routing, and you can get creative there. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we are seeing, like the immediate need. And one thing that seems to be pretty consistent across all the people who are building personal AI is their moat and their desire is their personal data, is their personal brand. Their individual themselves is their currency, and they don't want to submit the data, right? They want to use the AI because that's the next generation of optimizing your work life as well as personal life. And they care about privacy, and how these models are built and how much control I have, which all suits to what we are in the first place, principally, right? We want to give that control to the users, own your data, get your model to work for yourself. It's a small model. It scales horizontally. No data is shared between any two models. No memory is shared between any two memory stacks, we call them. So I think that's kind of where my energy is spent lately as well, like just telling out and understanding, making market understand the differences between what exists, other players, and what personal AI is, and which are optimal for what needs. Personal AI obviously will not solve everything, but we have a place where people care about personal data and personal models.
Yeah. I'm interested because you mentioned, the idea of being able to talk as well. And we continue to see just an absolute, some incredible advancements in some of the voice and sound applications of it. How are you incorporating that where it, maybe it's not just written or textual, but also being the spoken part of AI?
Yeah, so we have. So it's a matter of weeks, if not days, that will be available in Personal AI app. And not just any voice, that will be your voice. I mean, it has to be personal. Come on.
Absolutely. And I'm interested in where do you think that goes? Because obviously we're probably pretty early in it, but we continue to see a lot of musicians and things like that where you can replicate the voice very, very well. And some of the earlier ones not as good, but now it's getting to the point where it's very, very good. How have you seen that advance, and where do you think that's going?
Yeah, I think the issue that we are probably stressing on is not just about voice or mind or visuals, right? Like generally the deep fakes existed for a long period of time, even in the celebrity world. And this problem existed all the way since the images became a thing, like on the internet, right? So I think generally the companies who are building AI technologies now, because it's poses a greater risk to the identity, and how the government kind of plays the role in protecting the identity, I think will become important. In other words, internet gave us a good medium to communicate with each other and exchange content, and somebody produces the content and other people are consuming the content. And so far we have figured out what the transaction looks like, and there is some giving and there is some taking. Now with AI, it's almost like a 2.0 version of the internet, or even web 3.0 kind of like falls into that realm as well with the AI. So I think protecting the identity and what kind of transaction need to exist needs to mature. And my message to the people that I speak to is, you cannot just wait for the law to kind of step in and figure out who took your data to train their models, as much as you have to step forward and take control of your own data, right? Build your personal model so that way it can start benefiting you and the people around you and your business and your family, your friends, Otherwise, it will be another social media. But at the same time, like with every technology step up, the maturation about some of these issues, I guess, will emerge and will be fixed. So I think it's a natural progression to how the technology kind of penetrates into our lives, and we have seen that in the history, and the history kind of repeats, but in a different form and in different modalities and different fidelities. Yeah.
Yeah. What have been some of the things that you've seen as maybe some of the biggest hesitations that people have? I know you've talked about owning the data, which is probably top of a lot of people's minds. Are there other things that as you're exploring this and talking to people about it that you've seen either some hesitation with or some of the biggest concerns with?
Ownership of the data and the control, I think, are the two big pieces, right? So now, okay, what does the ownership mean? What does control mean? You can kind of like double click on what does exactly mean in the experience. Let's just say if you let's just step back, like 10 years ago, what you did, like when we had Google search and Bing searches, etc., you would go to google.com, you would search, and you would find that information is available on Kyle's website or Kyle's podcast. So I will go to Kyle's website and then consume that information. Now, if Kyle puts it publicly, great, I will read it. If Kyle has a paywall, then I would have to pay and then read that information. But technically, we are routed back to Kyle's work. We are routed back to an organization work. We are routed back to a specific business, right? That in the AI world is attribution. So in other words, when you ask a question or when you push a prompt to a model, what is the underlying data that is supporting it, and who is responsible for that data? And right now, large language models are not good at attribution of the data. So I think that's one of the important things. And I think personal AI, by design, is associated with an individual, right? And we do have the mechanisms of attributing the data, the response back to the person. And it's very fascinating because we do have like community of people. So we have this concept of like groups or lounges, we call them. It's like AI lounge, where a group of people can come in and then contribute on a specific topic. Let's say you are super passionate about volleyball, get your like 20 volleyball fans and then like basically train a model. And then when you ask a question, basically the response will have, hey, these are the contributors, potentially for this response. So that is almost like the next level of our model release that's going to happen. But yeah, attribution I think is really important, and just ensuring it's not just one size fits all, right? Ensuring a little bit of payback, a little bit of value democratization that is economically, kind of beneficial to the people involved. So I think that's important. It's not just about technology, so I can take your data and it's available publicly, so I can give it out. It's kind of a pathetic world in a way. So I think, as responsible human beings, we get to do, what we think is the right thing. And I think personal AI has a lot of those characteristics, and the future may be, billions of personal AIs and a few, big models. They all work in conjunction. That's also fine.
Yeah, I'm interested in diving into that just a little bit more. How do you see that playing out as the future of personal AI and the future of more personalized AI in general? We're obviously seeing the beginnings of it, but how do you see that going forward?
Yeah, so I think there are use cases for every different forms of models, right? So there's one general models. Obviously, there's large language models that exist today, and there are at least I can count 10 to 15, if not more, players that are happening. And some of them will survive, some of them will stop, and I'm sure some of the big techs will survive. And there are then personalized AIs, which I would still define it slightly different than personal AI. Personalized AIs are, you have a base intelligence, let's just say food, right? there may be a collection of food intelligence, and based on who you are and based on what your preference is, it may suggest specific things for you. That I would consider like personalized AIs. It's almost like still foundationally built on an aggregated model, but because there is an input, then you have some personalized experiences. Personal AI, our definition of personal AI is a completely separate, like unique model that is like and only or solely built on a person, right? It doesn't know like the other things. It may consult with the other models to give you an opinion, but fundamentally the model is trained on individual persons. Therefore, we don't conflate like who is Kyle versus who is Suman. So I believe there will be some sort of a exchange or transactions that will likely happen in terms of like negotiation, if you will, between a personal AI and potentially a personalized experience. So imagine this, right? Airbnb. Suman wants to book an Airbnb in Santa Barbara. Right now, I have to go to Airbnb website and I have to tell the locations, the preferences, and I have to search, and then ultimately Airbnb AI engine is providing me some recommendations, and I'm making the decision. Right. So right now, I'm giving the data to Airbnb to kind of tell me or give me that personalized experience. Well, in the future, imagine you open Airbnb app and Airbnb will consult with your personal AI and do that negotiation and give you what recommendation it is, right? Same thing with Uber. Like you open Uber app right now and you are sending your location to Uber servers. What if that is flipped 180 degrees? Uber will make a call to your personal AI to give you the ultra personal ride experience based on that current situation. So I think there's a good trajectory in here, and I think it will take time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested in what it is. What is it like, going to market in the AI space right now? So you've been working on this, pre kind of this explosion of AI and LLM specifically. But what is it like, taking some of these things to market right now in, as there's lots of things happening, the space is continually changing and it's becoming very, very, it's a hot growing space right now. Yeah. What is it like going to market both with the company and the products and some of the new features that you're coming out with?
Yeah. It's very fascinating for me building this company, primarily because we went from I don't know what you're talking about to everybody is talking about the same thing. I mean, there is a reason why we are personal.ai, right? We set out to build a category and then the category just happened. Just like that, it happened. So I think going to the market right now is about educating the market, right? The differences of the market. The interesting thing about technology is like once you have a core foundational technology that is built, you have a whole number of different experiences and applications that you can build on top of it, right? And then you can unlock those experiences. It's like internet. Once we had the internet, we have .com, and once we have the protocols of standards of HTTP and HTML, like boom, you have like millions of websites. Then you don't know, do I go to Amazon to buy, or there are like million other shopping websites, do I go to other places to buy? So it will take time to kind of mature, like what brands to sustain and what brands to trust, and what is the difference between one versus other. And for me, my focus is trust and control. Like I want to solve for people and humans first. There is tons of money that is getting poured into the AI industry, and I perceive that as like, some people who are powerful can also just like simply buying the market, right? Well, as a person that is grounded, building the startup from the ground up, I would want to win the market, right? And do the right things, because it's very easy to get tempted and take shortcuts and give people something that you will repeat in the future. And I don't want to do that. So going to the market right now for us is like clearly articulating what does it mean to get a personalized experience versus build something of your own with personal AI, versus what are the use cases that a large language model will solve, and what are the use cases that we are focusing on, and let them make choice, right? Let people make the choice. And it isn't like, everybody is like one winner, as much as there will be like multiple players and multiple winners, and multiple different people solving on different specific use cases and issues. And for personal I just want personal AI to be an asset for every individual person on the planet, because it belongs to them. It's almost like, you are growing a second you alongside, like learning and growing in your career for yourself.
Yeah.
That'll be an asset for your family in the future.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fascinating to think about, and I am excited to see some of this like new direction and some of the possibility, because I think it is so immense, and I feel like we're just at the very, very beginning of a lot of this. Like what can we do with a lot of these things that are coming to fruition right now? I'm interested from your side. You mentioned coming to market and being a founder, and have founded your second company. What have been some of the lessons that you've learned broadly, founding multiple companies and helping to grow them and scale them up?
I would say stick to the problems that you are focused on solving. Honestly, I'm sure like everybody has like multiple different distractions, right? And when you have big players making moves and pouring in money and doing like tons of marketing as well, you do get intimidated sometimes. Like for example, right, like 2 years ago, personal AI wasn't a thing on Google or anywhere else. Well, guess what, like now everybody is building a personal AI. Like literally every company has some version of personal AI. So I think the most important thing is focus, dedication, vision, and being close to your customers and focusing on the problem that you are at, and not get carried too much from the noise that tends to happen. And by the way, I'm saying it, but even I have a very hard time being able to not get distracted on other things. Now, there are two ways to think about it. One, you got to keep up with what's happening in the industry, and you got to filter out and use that information to make the appropriate decisions. But it's not about like making a knee-jerk reaction and then changing the company's direction overnight because something else happened. So it's a delicate balance, and I think being grounded and being like very thoughtful and curious about what's happening in the market and what does it mean to you. When do you make the moves appropriately? I think all goes into like the learning and making progress towards the dreams that you envision versus other people envision.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely great. What advice would you give to somebody who is thinking about either founding a company or building an AI driven company or an AI product or something like that?
I think probably two things. I think one, be grounded, meaning there is ups and there is downs and there is excitements and there is issues, right? And we can only do so many things at times, and sometimes a lot of things can happen very fast because of like other variables involved. But I think staying grounded and staying present, I think, is really important. And within the context of AI, I would say try to understand like what exactly is the moat that you have versus other companies, um, before you jump into building it. Or for example, if you're leveraging existing technologies, that's great, but what is your moat? Is the moat your connections with a specific market, or you have a community and you have a specific ways of penetrating into that community, whatever that may be, or maybe it's the data that you collect, I don't know. But I think like trying to understand what gives you differentiation before it's too late, I think is important.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good advice to understand, to one, be grounded, and then two, to understand, the market and your company, and, what are some of the differentiators, like you said, super, super critical. It's easy. And I think we've probably all seen this. It's easy to have a really great idea, but it can be just that, a great idea if it doesn't have some of these other things, like the focus to do it, and then the, some of the good reason, the value that it will deliver. Because ultimately, if it doesn't, then it probably should just stay a good idea. Well, Suman, this has been a really, really great conversation. We've touched on a lot of different things, but is there anything that we touched on or didn't get a chance to touch on that you wanted to add?
I think we touched on a lot. All I would say is, if you're not already, like, start building your own model, put it in your day-to-day use. It almost gets like too magical once you invest a little bit of time in it. I would want to see a world where everybody takes control of their own lives and own models.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, I've got a couple of questions to wrap up, but before we do that, where can people find out more about you, about Personal AI, and the things that you're working on?
About Personal AI is pretty easy. Personal.ai. You wouldn't miss it. You just Google Personal AI and we'll be the first one. About if like specifically if you want to communicate with me, I'm serious, like go to s.personal.ai and you can chat with me, the human version, but you can also get a taste of my AI version as well. It knows a lot about me. Yeah, but I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, channels. I do not tend to do messaging on any of the social channels because I know my data is not serving on for my benefit. So all my communication happens in Personal AI.
Okay, great. Well, we'll put the links in the show notes as well, so you can check that out. But I do have, like I said, a couple of questions to wrap up. And the first one is, have you read or watched or listened to anything that you found particularly interesting? And this can be business or AI related, but it doesn't have to be.
So speaking of the whole, ethics and how you would want to like build a company, for what reasons, sometimes you may have like too many different shortcuts and stay grounded. I think it's very interesting because I'm enjoying the Painkiller TV series like right now. Me and my wife has some time at night where we sit together and kind of enjoy some time together, and we watch TV, and typically like one of the shows. So I think it definitely gives like a little bit like perspective on what you should not do, but at the same time, like, how do you carry the passion and vision for making it happen? So I think there's a delicate balance that you will have to do. Yeah, sure, that's like too real because like people, but AI is no different in many forms of fashion to a degree, right? So being able to do things like a little bit more ethically and for human, I think is important, and it's hard. So that's like a TV show, but I enjoy a lot of science fiction for sure. Like, so if you haven't watched Altered Carbon, it's an old series, but a lot of the concepts of Personal AI, such as like memory stack, a memory that basically remembers you forever. The word memory stack actually came from Altered Carbon TV series. So I can go on and on. I have many of such things. My favorite books is like Homo Sapiens from by Yuval Harari. I really like it. Like how like the past kind of influences the future. I think there's a lot to it. So there's some things I would say.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think those are some great recommendations. And finally, are there any products that you've been using that you've been enjoying recently, either digital products or physical products, anything?
Digital products or physical products? Digital products, I was never a big designer as much, but lately I've been doing some wireframes in Miro. So I think it's kind of cool, especially for like product people, because before I go to Figma and do high fidelity comps, which like takes a lot of time. When it is like simply wireframing, I think Miro gives you like a lot more flexibility. So I'm enjoying that. Other products, I mean, Midjourney and Stability AI for image generation, trying to figure out like how it incorporates. I got better at like prompt engineering generally with language models. I think I still have some ways to go getting prompt engineering right for the image generation. But eventually that will be part of personal AI as well. So I'm enjoying that. Physical product. Oh dear. I don't know if I can. Oh no, never mind. I don't know if I have anything that is super fascinating lately um, that I can think of. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, those are some great product recommendations and shout outs to those. All right. Well, Suman, this has been, again, an amazing conversation. Appreciate all of your insight and am super excited to see what the future holds for a lot of personal AI and kind of some of the things that we talked about in really people taking control of their data, their AI in a way that I think is, like we said a little bit ago, would have been science fiction and totally out there, but is coming quicker and quicker. And I think this is a fascinating space.
Thank you, Kyle. I had fun chatting with you.
Great. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you again next time. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on TikTok at prodigy.co and on Twitter at prodigyco. You can also follow me on both of those platforms at Kyle Larry Evans. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter Prodigy at prodigy.co. You can also follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans or check out my Medium publication Prodigy. Of course, you can check out all these links in the show notes.